Well, welcome to another audio archived offering. This is Marcia Sinetar, and in this audio, you're going to hear a story within a story. It's a kind of pictorial essay which a very talented, generous neighbor of mine and a very talented, generous YouTube manager of mine helped me put together. It's a story about a time when I was leading a very expansive, exciting life, a portion of my life in my younger days when I was just finishing up a tenured position, starting my own business, having a lot of irons in the fire, and beginning to take notes for an idea that I had on a book. The book was published about 10 years after the project that you're going to see in the pictures. And the name of the title of the book is Developing a 21st Century Mind. I had the feeling that we could use the material aspects of our life, the condition of the appearance of things, the state of things, to reflect the best, most glorious inner state that we have. That's what this is about. Now, I should add at this point that developing a 21st century mind is about that state of, shall we say, blessedness or wealth. Wealth meaning well-being, not so much what we have in the external, but what we are. And you can read about this in various expository commentaries on the Bible, on the Sermon on the Mount. But I would have to say that my own work, teaching and client work and student work and the projects such as you're going to hear about and see a little bit about here, my work is so varied that I wanted to add a description of what all I have been working with and teaching and learning about pretty much all of my life. And it does relate to the Sermon on the Mount. And I've just, in the last decade or so, been realizing that. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that I wanted to share with you. It was at the time, and still is, very difficult to describe to those who do not have a mystical understanding of capital R reality. I also want to mention another book, my autobiography called Joyful in the Silence. And both of these books, if you want to know more about where I was coming from and the process itself, you can find in those books. Now, this time of my life, busy as it was, I was starting to concentrate, really pay close attention to some of the teachings in Scripture. I don't think I had yet had that conversion experience that I speak about in my autobiography. I think what was happening is that I had read a passage in Isaiah 61, I think, about restoring the old ruins. And for some reason it triggered an idea in me, a sense in me, that there were things in me that needed restoration. And when I look at the word restoration more closely now, I see that there's this aspect of repair, regeneration, bringing order to something. And this was a great desire of mine, but not so much for the physical or material aspects of my life, which had started to become pretty good because of my, my work ethic, and I had a focus and an intention. I should add that work ethic, to me, speaks of good parenting. I write in my autobiography how my dad set the stage for that work ethic, his love of what he did for a living, and my ability to follow a calling. All this, I think, comes from my father. I write about that in my autobiography and give examples of that. Focus, intention. I think this is a grace, a gift. It's a wholly undeserved gift, and some of us hear this from birth. We may fight against it. We may roll it out slowly. It's a kind of holy agenda. I think it sets our marching orders for our life, whatever else our lot in life. We have that either from birth or from life experiences, and I think that's a discussion for another day. Within myself, I felt there were many, many things on the interior to repair, restore, to bring order to, and definitely regenerate. So this story within a story has something to do, the majority of it has something to do with that inner work. And for some reason, and this is what that book, Developing a 21st Century Mind, and some of the stories in my autobiography tell about, for some reason, I had the sense that as I would attend to my physical world, not so much the appearance of things, but the actual condition of things, which is different, things would improve. And at the end of this audio, I'll tell you what I learned. So here's the first little project that I took on while I was experimenting, as I say, to turn what we could call material insufficiency, whether it was lack of money or darkness or incapacity of some kind, into that more whole, light-filled reality that I was called to. This is complicated, and as I say, you can read about it in that book where I describe at length, probably too long, how this works. But at any rate, you see this little house, fire damaged, I think it was. It was what I could afford. I had a plan. The plan was to work a process, a twofold process. One, spiritual, as I said in the introduction, and two, material, to kind of turn the material limit into the unlimited, non-dual, right, wrong, good, bad reality, capital R, that I was called to. So the first thing was to take this dark little cottage cabin and see what I could do with it. Now the second thing, as you see from the second image or picture, was to turn that interior, dark as it was, unpleasant, into something more light-filled. And here was the experiment. The experiment, as I say, twofold. First of all, spiritual. And we have that word in the book of James that faith without works is dead. So there have to be some works involved. What kind of works? This is the question. And the answer for me is in Hebrews, the 11th chapter, that faith is the substance of the things we hope for. So in this physical experiment, material experiment, the idea was to start opening up the darkness and letting in the light. Actually, not in mind only, but actually, faith without works is dead. So you want, or I wanted, a lively faith. You know, we have that word from Thomas Merton in one of his books where he talks about the slave in the spiritual order. The slave in the spiritual order is the one who's bound over, hand and foot, into darkness, into evil, or limitation, or impairment of some sort. And the one who has a true freedom is the one who walks in the light, in the freedom of the light, in the liberty of the light. So this was the experiment. Could I do this in a physical sense? And then we turn to some of the ways we do that. And for me, the physical experiment, the material experiment, had to do with the interior and the exterior of an actual little house. And house, in the Bible, Scripture, one definition of house is our dwelling place, where we live, not just physically, but spiritually. Now, let's take a look at this next picture. I believe it was the kitchen, and the only thing that was left after we got through, John, my contractor, and myself, was that window, as you'll see from following pictures. Now, let me start first by talking about vision. Everything starts with a vision. I think in Scripture we read that without a vision, the people perish. So we need this kind of image or idea of something better, an atmosphere maybe of something better. And it's ongoing. I think it goes all through our life, even in very old age. So it's spiritual. There's no truck driver or inventor, architect, designer, parent, refuse worker. There's no one that doesn't have an idea or a feeling or a sense of something better, and that's spiritual. And in order to bring that spirituality, that atmosphere to pass, works are needed in faith. So the works, that means the task. And our task here, John and myself, was to take out everything except that window. All the shelves came out. Everything was painted, as you'll see. And the upshot of it was that we ended up with a beautiful space, a beautiful kitchen space. Now, going back to ourselves, our spiritual selves, aren't there things that we want, no matter who we are, where we are, in what condition our life, our relationships, aren't there things that we want? So I would suggest to you that this begins first of all with a vision, a spiritual sense of what we want, and that there are works in faith to bring it about. And about the actual remodeling, I was working with a tremendous contractor, very trustworthy, first name John, I think. And one thing that we did, and you can see that window that you saw hopefully in the last picture, that's still there. But we removed the wall. We removed the ceiling. So there was a low ceiling, and we took that off, and we added some false beams. These were lightweight. They wouldn't fall on you in an earthquake or anything. But they were beautiful. And then you see that kind of shelf bookcase, and everything started to be painted. All the shelves came off. The shelving interior was going to be open, and it was really if we can go back and forth between the material and the spiritual, the idea spiritually was to transcend that closed space, to open it up, as I said. And the material had to do, of course, with doing it. The task, that's the work of faith, to, shall we say, invest in the thing hoped for, the very essence of the thing hoped for. And what I was hoping for was a beautiful, light-filled space, which you'll see in the next picture. So let me continue here with the practical the concrete material of the work, the task. John, my contractor, really reliable, really honest, wonderful to work with. And I decided that we would put in that French door, and you're going to see it later in a minute, in another shot, how it changes the exterior. We're still working on the interior. So we put in that French door, and you see that cabinet that in the previous shot was facing the kitchen, and you might still be able to see that window in the kitchen. So we opened up that wall with light, and we took off the ceiling. There was a low ceiling. It's a tiny little cabin, house, cottage, dwelling place. Tiny, maybe 500, 700 square feet max. And so we took off the ceiling and exposed the pitch of the roof, and then we added some false beams. These were beautiful. They were lightweight, gorgeous, and it just completely changed the appearance of that room. It was just gorgeous when we finished inside. The hardwood floors existed. They were perfect after we finished. Anyway, that's the material work. Now, the spiritual side of it, and by the way, the spiritual side of it had to do with concretely exposing or investing in the substance of the thing hoped for, and I'm using Hebrews here. Substance, you could define it, and it is defined in two different ways, many different ways. One is the goods, the actual goods of a thing. Two is the confidence of a thing. And three, the substance is really the existence of God. It's the investment in the existence, the true substance. Okay, this is a big subject. Since I've written a whole book about it and several books about it, I'm not going to go into it here. Suffice it to say, this work, physical work, exposed the spiritual vision. And this is the same for all of us in our spiritual vision. There's always going to be some kind of work involved. Belief, yes. Physical, possibly. Usually. Let's go to the next picture. So now we come to the exterior, and you see that French door, and next to it, to the left, as you're looking at it, that window from the kitchen, which was also replaced eventually, and we started to paint everything white, inside, outside, and this last bit on the outside, the exterior, also included a little work on the roof, which still had some of that smoke from the fire damage. So finally, you see the finished product, and the finished product, you have to admit, whether you like this style or not, was love motivated. In other words, something in me, and thankfully in John, our contractor, my contractor, caught the image of light, capital L, that on the spiritual side of things wanted to come through, wanted to be reflected in that little house, that little dwelling place. And the love motivation has a piece of preparedness in it. Those are the tasks that one does materially to support faith or confidence in the true substance, the real substance, whether you call it whole or unified or reflective of the invisible image within oneself, which is spiritual, or, as we read in the Bible, the actual image of the invisible God. So we're bringing that to pass, if I could put it in those very abstract, metaphysical, or mystical terms. And I hope you like the result. I loved the result. I lived in that little house for a while, and finally I sold it, garnering enough income from the profit to continue my studies, graduate studies, I think at that time, and I'm not sure of the timeline here. I think at that time I was in graduate school working on my PhD. And doing all of this so that I could complete other things I had in mind for myself, for my life, and for my mom, as I said in the introduction, who needed some care. Now, if I have time on this audio, I'm going to complete this little story with another story. And it's the story of villagers. This is well known, used in many sermons. Villagers who were expecting a drought, experiencing a drought, I should say. And in their experience of the drought, they were praying for rain, praying for rain. And finally, a little boy came around to the church, and he had an umbrella in his hand, and his father, who was part of the church group, said to him, "Son, why do you have an umbrella? It's not raining yet." And the little boy looked at his father, and he said, "Yes, but I've just prayed for rain." Meaning, he carried that umbrella in a positive expectancy of the thing, the substance, the rain that he had prayed for. So there's no result if there's no positive expectancy, and the umbrella in his hand represented the works. That's the way I see it. You may differ. I hope you'll communicate somehow. Thank you so much for listening to this story. So I said at the start that I'd kind of summarize with what I've learned, at least, from my own life and experiences. My projects, if you will, my writing and teaching, and the students that have taught me, the clients that have taught me. Number one, it's lifelong. That we seem to have this quest to uncover what we sense within our inner life, to grow towards that state, that spiritual state within, that seems to us blessed, whatever it is and however we word it. Number two, it's universal. I've learned that beyond culture, background, experiences, upbringing, illness, almost everyone senses within something that they're reaching for and going toward. So it's not just our individualized experience, but we can, if we're lucky, find others to share this growth with, this lifelong learning, this universal quest. The third, it's like it, and that is, it's a reaching out, a traveling on a path for wholeness. And that's what that lifelong learning, that universal quest seems to me to be about. It's a reaching for, a traveling on what Isaiah called the highway of holiness. We're actually uncovering that glorious state within that speaks to us of completion, our completion and the completion of the material within which we are so lucky to live. And that reaching out, that quest for wholeness, we read about again in Ephesians, I think it's 2:22, where we read that we're no longer wanderers in a wilderness. And in my writings, very often I use this term teleos. Teleos means completion. I think it's a very spiritual, both human and spiritual, quest for a return to what we know we really are. And this is a different path. So we may feel ourselves or actually be set apart, called out, living a different life. And I'm reminded of that, to me, really tremendous film. You can stream it for free online, called The Chosen. It's about the apostles and it's about Jesus. And in one scene, I think it's the Apostle Simon says to Jesus about the spiritual life, some of the dangers of the life. He says, this is different. I know what you want, but this is different. He's saying it's too different. And Jesus says to him, get used to different. I think that's what I've been saying. I think that's what I've been learning. Thank you so much for listening.